Times, they are a-changing, Bob Dylan once wrote, and even though Ron Burgundy had never heard that song, Fenway Sports Group and Kyle Dubas have. They made another big front office hire. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Locked On Penguins podcast. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day or your first watch of the day. You can get this show on YouTube for free or at any of your favorite podcasting platforms. And before we get going today, we got to mention our title sponsor, Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL and you'll get a free water bottle with every order. You don't want to take your bird dogs off. That we promise you. We're back. It's a new day, and joining us again, you know him, you love him, the man, Hunter Hodes, back from vacation, back on the show. Man, we missed you.
It's good to be back. You know, I loved being in Barbados for almost a week, celebrating, my 3-year anniversary with my girlfriend. And yes, I posted a picture. Well, a couple of pictures on Twitter. No, I am not engaged. I think so many people thought I proposed to my girlfriend. That is coming probably next year or the year after. That was a different ring on her engagement ring finger. So I wanted to just clear the air there. If people
in the business, we call that a tease.
Engage. Yeah, it's a small tease is what it was. But Pat did a tremendous job with the couple of shows that he did while I was on vacation. Thank you all so much for listening to those. But glad to be back. And of course, while I'm on vacation, the Penguins dropped a lot of news. You covered a lot of it. They dropped some more news right now. I was coming home on Wednesday. So let's just jump into it, Pat.
Yeah, and we wanted to get you back for that rather than have me clunk my way through whatever news there is. So as we talked about at the top, Penguins made a pretty, in my opinion, significant hire to their front office, naming Doug Wilson the senior advisor of hockey operations. So, I just said it. I'll get into it. We'll both get into it. I think this is a slam dunk of a hire for this front office. So, Hunter, your thoughts on it now that you're all situated and back. How you feeling about this one?
It's funny. It dropped right as we were just packing up and about to go to the airport. And I looked at my phone and I'm like, that's interesting. I was just really surprised by it because I know he had been wanting to get back into the league. I just didn't think it would be with the Penguins. Remember, he left the Sharks. I believe it was for health reasons.
They said health-related reasons. I think it was 22, early 2022, late 2021, one of those.
I believe it was April of last year, if I recall correctly. So about a year and a half ago at this point. And he had a pretty, I would say, good tenure with the Sharks. He made some mistakes. That Mark-Edward Vlasic contract is an albatross. Let's just put that out there. But he had the original trade for Erik Karlsson, which was a slam dunk. He drafted Joe Pavelski, also a slam dunk. The Joe Thornton acquisition, that was just highway robbery right there. The fact that he was able to get Joe Thornton and honestly not even give that much up in return. He had been with the Sharks for about 2 decades. Brought them up to a perennial contender for numerous years. He was the architect behind that 2016 team that lost to the Penguins in 6 games. And hey, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah. and you said it there, and it's spot on, is that he took this expansion franchise that was middling and either really bad or just on the bubble of being competitive or in the conversation from about 2005 until maybe 2-3 years ago, they were always a team that you looked at in the West and said, man, if there's a team that could come out of the West, it's San Jose. And you look at the track record in his time there, 14 of the 19 years he's with the team, they make the playoffs. They played in 30 playoff series, which was second only to the Penguins at that time in 32. They went to the Western Conference Final 5 times. They played in the one Stanley Cup final in 2016 against the Penguins, which we all remember very well. And they won the Pacific Division 5 times. And not the Pacific Division we know right now. We're talking about the Pacific Division when LA, Anaheim, all were good. And it was a wide open division for the taking. So he put together some incredible rosters, and I'm so glad he's got his health back and the Penguins were able to get him.
Right. And, he'll be like the senior advisor to some of the hockey operations. He'll be involved in some of the personnel decisions, trades, signings, Wilkes-Barre, all that good stuff. He'll be traveling on the road with the team. He'll also be working from home per the release. I think he'll also be working at Penguins games in Pittsburgh as well. And I think it's pretty obvious he's probably going to be sitting right next to Kyle Dubas. I think in the press box, it's probably going to be Dubas in the center of it. And then you have Jason Spezza on one side and then like Doug Wilson on the other. And then you have some of the other people behind him. But yeah, I mean, anytime you can add experience like that to your front office, someone who has done a really good job throughout, his career as an executive, you do it. And again, we've talked about this a lot. This just goes to show how diverse of a front office this team has now. You've added a guy who, yes, is he up there? Is he, I guess, a quote unquote hockey man? Yes, but he actually has been pretty good at his job for most of his tenure. Went a little south toward the final few years with the Sharks, just because the Sharks were kind of going towards the rebuild that they're in now. But for most of his tenure there, he put together some really good teams. It really wasn't his fault that the Sharks kept coming up short. Because remember, during those early 2010 years, the Sharks were playoff choke artists. That's what people thought of them when they played the Kings and maybe some of these other teams. But they were still a great regular season team, and he pulled off some great moves, as I discussed a little earlier.
I mean, their biggest issue was kind of the same issue that the Washington Capitals faced up until they won in 2018. They just would always run into a team that was just a little bit better, or a team that was so on a hot streak and a heater that they weren't going to be able to get by them. I mean, you look at that, like I say this all the time, you look at the 2016 and the 2017 Stanley Cup Finals. If I weren't a Penguin fan, I would have been rooting for San Jose to get their first cup. And they were a great team that year, genuinely great team. And same thing in 2017 with the Predators. Would have been rooting for them to get their first Stanley Cup. Another great team. But they were playing my favorite team, so forget that. I don't want them to win there. But the main thing I also want to say about this is I want to give a shout out to the Steve Dangle podcast, because I'm a huge fan of them. And obviously, like, I have gotten a lot of Dubas information and background on him from them. And I was actually listening to them today, and they brought up the fact that one of Kyle Dubas's Achilles heels he's just almost too nice of a guy. He always wants to do right by his guys. And in sports, you don't really get awards for being a good guy. You have to be a little bit ruthless, and you have to be willing to make tougher decisions rather than, oh, I'm going to let this guy go because I want to do right by him and he's not going to play here. Or this is my guy. I got to give him what he wants and what he needs in this contract. And it can lead to problems in the future. You look at Doug Wilson for the most part, he's the opposite. I said it to you before we hit record. It's an underrated, not spoken of often move by Doug Wilson. But a few years ago, everybody on San Jose is hurt. And all of a sudden, anchoring their first line is Barclay Goodrow. And the Sharks aren't going to make the playoffs. The Sharks are looking like they're going to have to count it as an off year. So what does he do? Rather than, Barclay Goodrow played above his head and did so well, we're going to reward him with a deal. No, they flipped him to a contender for a first-round pick. And that is just incredibly good asset management. And while I do think Kyle Dubas does do very well with asset management, he can do better. And now having a voice like Doug Wilson in the room with him is going to make a guy who's already a great GM even better.
You took the words right out of my mouth there. That was a great acquisition. He showed that he knew where the team was going. He capitalized on it. He got a good return. I also will never get over the fact how he got Brent Burns before he went to Carolina. for basically nothing. You remember that trade? It was a first-round pick, Charlie Coyle, and I believe it was Setaguchi. And that was it. That's all it took to get Brent Burns. His trades, a lot of them for just the big-time players, were for pennies on the dollar. And I think he can bring that expertise over to the Penguins in a big way, especially if the Penguins want to go hunting a little bit the trade deadline. I expect them to, because Kyle Dubas, I don't think, is ever going to stop tinkering with this team. But it has way more pros than it does cons. Heck, does this movie even have a con? No, I don't really think it does. You're adding another voice to your front office. You're making it more diverse. You're adding someone who has done great work in the past. And it's like that big of a position. It's a senior advisor to Kyle. He's still running the show. This is not going to be someone who's making the decisions and all that. He'll just be helping out when he can. And, sure, he's maybe a little bit of an old time hockey guy, but sometimes you need that kind of voice in your front office while also having your analytics group hires that the Penguins have. It's a nice mix between those. Wilson, Mapofu, Spezza. This is shaping up to, I think, to be a really good front office.
For sure. And not that Kyle Dubas doesn't have a good track record or doesn't have contacts, but because the league is what it is, this gives him a little bit more credibility in this front office, a little bit more credibility. You see the name Doug Wilson pop up on your phone, or you see the name Doug Wilson on the front office roster sheet. And that, because the league is the way it is, guys are going to go, you know what? That Doug Wilson, he's been around for a while. I'm going to take that call. And he was very much, for a long period of time, one of those guys that if his name popped up on your phone for a trade, don't answer.
Just like how it is now sometimes with Kyle Dubas, Chris McFarland, especially in Colorado. Anyone who gets a call from him, please just don't answer it. Send him to voicemail. Yeah, there's a few GMs that fit that mold now.
100%. So that's going to do it for this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about the rest of the Metro a little bit and how some offseason moves or lack thereof could work in the Penguins' favor. But first, we got to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is Birddogs. Plain and simple, no hard sell here. Birddogs, they make you look really good. Their stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit a little bit slimmer through the thigh, and that gives your legs a little bit more of a sculpted look. I can tell you guys firsthand, I have the shorts. I wear them anytime I'm at the house and even sometimes when I'm out. And truly, my girlfriend cannot stop talking about how nice my legs look when I wear these things. So along with that, they are incredibly comfortable. They have cloud knit fabric that fits better than shorts, so much so that when I wear these on anytime I'm not at the office or out and about, I don't want to take them off. I almost regret and hate the fact that I can't wear them when I'm out and about. So that might change here soon because they're that comfortable. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnhl or use the promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout, and you will get a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnhl and get that free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take off your Birddogs, we promise you. We're back here on the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am Patrick Damp. That is Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet. You can follow him at Hunter Hodes. And of course, you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Now, as we said before we took a break there, we're going to take a look here at the Metropolitan Division and how some of these offseason moves for the bottom half of the division could really work in the Penguins' favor. And I'm going to tee it up for this and see if we're on the same wavelength here, Hunter. But I think there's a really good chance that this Penguins team isn't going to be in the wild card. They're going to finish third in the Metro.
I can see it, especially if the Rangers do take a big step back this upcoming season. They have a lot of pressure on them, I think, heading in. I mean, Shesterkin, he's one of the three best goalies in the league. I would probably put him number 2 right now, in my opinion, behind Vasilevsky. He's going to bring in every single night. But some of their big ticket players, while they have had pretty decent regular seasons, they kind of turn into ghosts in the playoffs. I want to see more from Artemi Panarin. I want to see more from someone like a Mika Zibanejad. I don't think he's a true top center on a contending team. I think obviously he's a very good player, but I think when you're trying to contend, I don't think he should be your top center, in my opinion. You have Adam Fox, who I think is one of the favorites to win the Norris this year. He's incredible. But you look down that lineup, they have the kids there, Lafreniere, Kakko. They got to start showing some glimpses of why they were picked where they were picked. I mean, especially Lafreniere. I think if he's bad this year, they're going to try to trade him next offseason. Heedle's the one who I think is the best of that bunch. But, man, I don't know. Their offseason moves were interesting, to say the least. You bring in Blake Wheeler, who I think is kind of cooked at this point. You bring in Nick Bonino, Tyler Pitlick, some of these guys for bottom six roles defensively. Again, Fox is great. Lindgren is a good partner for him. Keandre Miller is probably one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. But I don't know. Something about them, even with no Gallant there anymore, Laviolette, sure, he can get, the best out of a team early on in a tenure, but is that really going to be the case here with a Rangers team that, they're on the, I wouldn't say downswing, but especially age-wise, they're going up there, to say the least. And again, also with Laviolette, his teams don't bring a lot of offense. And with the offensive players that the Rangers have, I think that might be more difficult for them heading into the season. So I definitely could see a scenario where the Penguins do finish third behind the Hurricanes and Devils this year, and the Rangers take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, so as I figured, we're kind of on the same wavelength here. I do think this division's 1 and 2 are New Jersey and Carolina in either order. I look at the Rangers, and the one thing I will say is, one, I don't want to get this twisted. I don't want to get clipped and radioed here. I'm not saying the Rangers are bad. They're still a very good hockey team. The one thing I do think is going to work in their favor, you kind of hinted at this a little bit. They have Peter Laviolette behind the bench now. And if there's one thing we know from his history is that in his first 2-3 years, he gets the absolute most out of those teams. He takes them to heights you didn't expect. He puts them in an almost contender status. So that could work in the Rangers' favor. But then, like you were saying, I look at guys like Kakko, Lafreniere, now Jimmy Vesey's back. And Kakko and Lafreniere are still young enough, they can take a jump. They could, I don't want to say surprise, because when you're a younger guy, sometimes it takes time. You don't look as effective or that great in your early years, and then something clicks. All of a sudden, you're putting up 50, 60, 70 or more points because you finally have a feel for the league. You're starting to get into a rhythm and become an NHLer. But, I look at that team and a lot of the guys they're counting on right now, the trajectory that they're on, it looks like they're middle six forwards at best. And a guy like Jimmy Vesey has flamed out everywhere he's gone. I love Nick Bonino. He's got beachfront property in my heart for everything he did during the Stanley Cup runs, but he's pretty cooked at this point. Same thing with Blake Wheeler. And not to mention, he's coming from Winnipeg, which by all accounts was an absolutely toxic place to play. And he was the captain. So how much of that does that fall on his shoulder? And then on the other New York team, with the Islanders, the old adage is someone has to score. But I look at that roster and who's it going to be? Brock Nelson had 36 last year, and he's genuinely great. But other than him, they only had 2 players last year eclipse 20 goals.
I don't think the Islanders are that good. I understand why Islanders fans are optimistic, but I really just don't see it. Defensively, okay, Pelech, Pulak, they're great. You won't get an argument from me. That Scott Mayfield contract is hilarious. I mean, Lou Lamoriello is probably not even going to be there at that point anyway. He's so old at this point. But, I mean, Brock Nelson, one of the more underrated goal scorers, he's great. Matt Barzal, great playmaker. He's awesome. Anders Lee, very annoying net front presence. It seems like every game against the Penguins, he scores a goal, him and Brock Nelson. But outside of that, and hey, Penguin killer Josh Bailey is gone, even though he's kind of cooked at this point in his career. Outside of that, I'm sorry, I really don't see it with the Islanders. Islanders fans were wanting Lane Lambert fired for most of last season. They barely even squeaked into the playoffs. The only reason they did is because the Penguins crapped the bed against the worst team in hockey.
And like I was saying before that, they had two other guys who topped out 20 goals, and it was Anders Lee, who's back, and Zach Parise, who's still out there. They could bring him back. Lou Lamoriello apparently loves him, so he might be back. But it's a typical Lamoriello team. They're great in goal. They're strong defensively, but nobody on offense is a game breaker. So,
right.
Again, everybody loves to use the old hockey cliche of somebody's got to score, but no, they don't. If you don't have anybody that can score, nobody is going to score. The other thing I want to say that could work really well in the Penguins' favor to finish third in the Metro, and hilarious, we're sitting here talking about them only finishing third in the division, but their early schedule is soft. They play a lot of the lower tier teams like Columbus, and then they play the Pacific and they're not playing Vegas and Edmonton. They're playing San Jose. They're playing LA, who, while improved, I'm still not a huge believer in just yet. And they also play Seattle, who, for as good as they've been, I do think the Penguins match up better with them. So they have a chance in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season to stack some very valuable points, which when we get to the end of the season and we're playing the lion's share of those Metro games, they're going to obviously still matter because this division is going to be a logjam at the top. But if you bank those early points, you put the numbers up early, that gives you more room for error at the end, which was what they struggled with last year. They were unable to have that margin for error come the end of the year.
Right. And if, perfect point there. Heck, their final game is against the Islanders. And wouldn't you know it, it's on national television. I wonder why, Pat. I wonder why that game is on national television. And I'm wondering why these NHL schedule makers scheduled the Islanders for the final game. I bet that's going to be very important.
Let's be honest here, though. It's the Islanders. I don't know what kind of voodoo wizardry they have over there in Long Island, but again, I have to add this caveat. We do this every year, but we're like, this Islanders team, I don't know about them. And then next thing you know, they're making a run for the division, and we're like, how?
Beats me, man. And to go off your point about the schedule being soft, I have the October schedule up right now, right? First 5 games of this season, non-playoff teams.
Well, to be fair,
in October,
we're a non-playoff team too.
Yes, I know. The Penguins did not make the playoffs last year, but for a team that wants to contend and make the playoffs this year, 7 of their first 9 games are against teams that did not make the playoffs. There's a perfect opportunity for them to start fast, and they're going to need to, so that, as you said, they're not going to have to be chasing points at the end of the season like they did this past year, where you're needing to, having a must win against the Blackhawks. Because, maybe if you were already in the playoffs, you dropped that game, you screw them over maybe with Connor Bedard, even though they got Connor Bedard anyway. But at that point in the season, the stakes were just too high. You can't have it come down to that. You need to take care of business when you can. That also means not having nearly as many overtime losses this upcoming season. They were horrendous to start OT last season. That needs to change. I expect it to change. And that happens. Plus, Penguins start out quick, and maybe a team like the Rangers or Islanders falter a little bit. There's no reason to think they can't finish third with the depth that they have up front, the top 6 being great, and now defensively they're a lot better than last year. And of course, the goalie just needs to stay healthy.
Yeah, it's all right there for them to make the Metropolitan Division playoffs rather than scratch and claw for a wild card and maybe cross over into the Atlantic. So that's going to do it for this segment. When we come back, we put out a little feeler for you guys. Figured it's Friday here, or almost Friday. Hear from our audience, and we'll answer a couple of your questions when we come back right after this. Welcome back to the Locked On Penguins podcast. One more time for good measure. We appreciate you making this your first listen or watch of the day. as I said before we went to break, we put a feeler out, wanted to get some questions for you guys, see how the audience was feeling here now that we're coming up on a Friday. So we're going to start. It's going to be kind of a combining here of questions because we got the same question a bunch of different ways. So thanks to all of you who responded, by the way. I know we put that out on kind of some short notice, but basically a lot of people have asked, okay, so it seems like Kyle Dubas has been hitting all the right notes this offseason with all of his hockey operations moves, mainly just the roster. We're not going to talk. We already talked a good bit about Doug Wilson in the front office. So I'm going to take Matt Schaefer's question here and just use him as the example. He asks, Dubas has made a lot of good moves in his tenure with the team so far. However, what is one move he's made or hasn't made that you didn't like? See, for me, I really don't know if
It's a great question.
I would say I guess not finding a way yet to get Tomas Tatar since he's still out there. But as we kind of hinted at on this show before, the longer he's out there means the less leverage he has as a player to get a contract and get on a roster. So this really could just be a game of chicken between Kyle Dubas and Tomas Tatar.
And funny enough, and I apologize if my voice sounds a little bit mad today. I am battling a little bit of a cold that I suffered, funny enough, as I was coming home from Barbados. So that's just my luck, people. But funny enough, Pat, someone did ask that. What the heck is going on with Tomas Tatar? Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know what that situation entails. I don't know if he's in talks with other teams. Camp opens in just a couple of weeks. You figure he'll have a home by then, but honestly, who knows? But to get back to your original point, I would agree with you, I guess, with somehow not finding a way to sign Tomas Tatar. If there was, and this kind of goes with that, if there's another thing, not getting more offense for the bottom six. I mean, we beat that drum so many times on the show this offseason. I mean, I was doing that before you even joined. I guess that's really the one move where I would be like, okay, like, you made some other bottom six moves to shore up the defensive side. Where's the offense? So again, I think he's had, an A offseason to date. I just think I would like to see some more offense down there. I mean, if you want to talk about a move he's made, I don't like the term on the Ryan Graves contract. I think it's a little too long, but if he plays well throughout, I'm being made to look like an idiot. So I guess that's one small thing I guess I don't like.
Yeah, and with the Graves contract, I am a little uncomfortable with the term, but overall the number on it is good because barring another global pandemic, which knock on wood, lucky rabbit's foot, whatever superstition you got to have doesn't happen, we will see a pretty heavy rising cap. So it gets better as the contract goes on, so long as he doesn't fall off of a cliff. But yeah, I mean, overall, like, if I have complaints at this point about what he's done, it's nitpicking. It's trying to, I don't want to say look at a masterpiece because, still some moves that could be made, some improvements, but it's looking at an overall really quality body of work and trying to poke holes into it. Next one, it kind of transitions right into this. It sticks with the question from our buddy Mike. He asks, is Dubas actually batting 1,000 with trades, signings, and hirings? Or was Hextall just so bad that basic competence seems like genius to us?
I think it's more of the latter, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like playing blackjack at the casino and going cold. Yeah, everything Hextall did just didn't work. And there were things that I will say with hindsight, being 2020, yeah, you look at it now and you're like, oh, that was dumb. But like at the time, you could see justification and reasoning for it. But as I wrote about plenty of times with Penguins Perspectives on KDKA, they were hoping it was these longer shots. You were hoping this long shot paid off rather than going for certainty. And that really killed them down the stretch.
I agree. And again, I do think it's probably more of the latter because you're seeing an actual plan put out there. by Kyle Dubas in this front office. Now, if you compare that to Ron Hextall, who kind of just threw crap at the wall and hope it stuck, this is obviously seems like a home run, or a home run. Yeah, I think a home run higher is the way of looking at it, or just like a massive upgrade. You know that meme where you see a picture, you see the upgrade picture, and then you see the other picture. That's where I think this is when you go from Hextall to Kyle Dubas. Now, I don't know if Kyle Dubas is batting 1,000 this offseason. I would kind of put him at that 950 range, 920 to 950, 92 to 95. It's like you're writing a paper, right? And your teacher takes off a couple little points just because she doesn't want to give a 100 to just one or two students in the class. But still, 92, 95, that's going to up your grade pretty significantly, excuse me. So that's how I see it for this offseason, at least.
Yeah, it's been he's hit all the right notes. We'd like to see, like we said, and we've said it a million times, would we like to see more offense in the bottom six? Of course we would, but you got to pay a premium for that. And he didn't have a ton of flexibility. Would we have liked better situation in goal? Yeah, but there really wasn't anything out there that they could get without massively subtracting from their roster. Would I love to have them given Winnipeg a call and made a trade for Connor Hellebuck? Of course I would. But we've seen with the way Winnipeg is structuring their offseason, even though Hellebuck doesn't want to return, they're not willing to send guys out for pennies on the dollar. You have to provide them value. So of the available moves that he's had to make, I think he has made the best or closest to the best decision to improve this roster and get them back in the playoffs and maybe take one more shot at going to Lord Stanley's Castle.
I think everyone in this city can only hope for that one, just to get that fourth one. Are there any other questions you want to hit here? I mean, this one is actually interesting. What addition to the bottom six do you think will make the biggest impact throughout the year? I'm going to go Drew O'Connor if they don't sign Tomas Tatar. I'm really high on him heading into the year. If he can put together a double-digit goal campaign with, around 25, 30 points, that would be awesome. I think there's a lot of untapped potential with him for a full season in the NHL. I'm really bullish on him. If I had like a plan B in this case, I'm going to go with Noel Acciari, I think.
I was going to say, we kind of did this one before. And
yeah, that's true.
Like Noel Acciari, wow, I butchered that name. Noel Acciari. And the other one I said before was Alex Nylander. It's put up or shut up time for him.
Right.
He's probably going to get some top six time with the injury to Jake Gensel. So it's really time for him to prove not that he's a star, not that he's the next big thing, just that he's a consistent NHLer who can put up some okay numbers, play in your middle six, and be a full-time contributor.
Right. I agree. I think it's time for him to show what he can at camp. I mean, if he has a great camp and a great preseason, I think he's definitely going to take some top 6 minutes to start the year. And I liked what he did in the short sample size that he had this past season, playing on Evgeny Malkin's wing. Should have had a couple more goals, in my opinion. Had a really nice goal against the Red Wings late in the year. I'm intrigued about him. I'm not part of this little simp fan club that I know some people are part of when it comes to Nylander, but I'm fascinated to see what he can do given his age, given his sample size in NHL, all that good stuff.
For sure. Well, I think that's going to about do it for us here on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you always for listening, and we're going to call us the 2017 Penguins because we're going back to back. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. This is the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.